Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 5:30 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Russ Riesinger.
And I'm Jeanelle Slade. The wind's whipping through the Billings area, kicking up dust and causing problems for firefighters.
That wind has stuck around the area since yesterday. The gusts making it difficult for Billings firefighters to contain a fire that sparked near the Billings landfill.
Now, those flames started shortly before noon and burned a field south of Hillcrest Road.
High winds challenging Billings firefighters, sending trash flying through the air, but crews made quick work of the flames burning in that field next to the city landfill.
On scene, it appeared embers from burning trash at the landfill blew into the field and started the fire.
The wind gusts also challenging local power crews, but representatives from both Northwestern Energy and Yellowstone Valley Electric say overall power lines held up pretty well.
Q2's Mitch Laggy standing by live atop the Billings rims tonight to demonstrate those strong winds and talk about how it affects day-to-day happenings here in the Magic City. Mitch.
Well, Russ and Jeanelle, as you guys can very well tell, nobody is having a good hair day here in the Billings area. On top of the Billings rims, the wind gusts are still blowing pretty strong. And at the Billings Logan International Airport, strong wind gusts actually forced some flights to be canceled today. Now, according to the airport website, Cape Air flights arriving and departing from places like Sydney, Glasgow, Glendive, and Wolf Point were all canceled today. Now, here in the city, we even received word of a tree that fell onto a house in Billings. However, for power companies in our area, Northwestern Energy and Yellowstone Valley Electric Co-op, the wind has been pretty manageable. It's only caused minor outages that were able to be repaired right away.
You know, we've had a few, nothing major, quite honestly. The largest outage we've had was 33 meters over in the Shepherd area, and that was due to a storage shed getting blown up into the line, believe it or not. Other than that, mostly small, what I call onesie, twosie type outages, and obviously most of them being related to trees.
And Lisa Perry with Northwestern Energy told me that as of 3:30 in the afternoon today, that there were no power outages reported across the Billings area. Both companies told me that investments that they've made to their power infrastructure have made the wind a little bit less of a headache today. Russ and Jeanelle, back to you guys in the studio.
All right, thank you, Mitch.
That wind came roaring in. Q2 Chief Forecaster Bob McGuire standing by now to tell us what caused those gusts and how fast they actually got going.
They were screaming, I'm here to tell you. So yeah, what's the big deal? How come it was so windy today? That's what we went to find out. Let me show you. Here's what we had. We had a big old chunk of high pressure at the 10,000 foot level. We call it the mid levels. And that, as you know, is high pressure is heavier than the air below it, that low pressure. So what happened is that high pressure, that big chunk of air just started falling down to the surface. We call it subsidence. And as that thing falls down, it creates a lot of wind in the process of doing that. Plus, as it slides away, here's what happens. It creates a little lurch in the air, and so we get a little gap of air, and then when that air rushes in to fill in that gap, and that continues to create the wind. So how windy was it? We'll check out some of the areas. Big Timber, 71 miles per hour. Rapplejay, 66 mile per hour winds. Sheridan, 63. Billings, Logan, 62 mile per hour wind gust there. Melville, 61. Over in Laurel, it was 60 mile per hour winds in that area today. A very breezy day, and we still have a high wind advisory for the Beartooth Foothills, winds gusting to 65 miles per hour there until 11 p.m. on Wednesday. Plus, because of all the high winds, we have red flag warnings across almost all of the Q2 viewing area. High winds, high temps, low humidity. If a fire gets started in that area, it will burn out of control and erratically. Back to you guys.
All right, thanks so much, Bob.
Locally, the winds continue to rip through the state, but severe storms wreaking havoc nationally.
At least 23 people are dead, and a state of disaster has been declared after severe storms and tornadoes ripped through the central Tennessee this morning. Now, that includes Nashville's recently developed downtown, where at least one twister tore through, ripping roofs off and damaging an airport.
The severe weather also uprooted power lines, leaving tens of thousands of people without electricity. All the schools in Nashville have been closed for the day.
Here at home, the third escapee from the Hardin jailbreak last month is back behind bars tonight. 25-year-old Andrew Parham was captured at 11:30 this morning in Crow Agency. Bighorn County Sheriff Pete Bighair tells Q2 his deputies and U.S. Marshals made that arrest without incident. Parham, along with two other inmates at the Bighorn County Jail, overpowered guards early last month. The other two escapees were taken into custody a few days later.
A Billings man admits to conspiracy charges today after agents found 32 pounds of methamphetamine and more than $11,000 in cash last May.
The U.S. Attorney's Office says 62-year-old Bryn Mestis pleaded guilty to conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute meth. Mestis faces a minimum mandatory 10 years to life in prison and a $10 million fine. The court records show a meth trafficking investigation led authorities to Mestis and co-defendant Jerry Schuster.
The search of a vehicle revealed 30 pounds of meth inside 3 backpacks, along with $11,380 in cash and receipts documenting travel to California. Schuster pleaded guilty to trafficking in January and is now awaiting sentencing. It is Super Tuesday with a lot at stake in the 2020 presidential campaign. What happens today could go a long ways in determining who the Democratic nominee will be to take on President Trump this fall. Take a look here. 34% of all the delegates are up for grabs as voters in 14 states and American Samoa head to the polls. Bernie Sanders still has a slight edge over Joe Biden with a 60-54 delegate advantage, but Biden coming off a huge win in South Carolina over the weekend and also got help as 2 more candidates dropped out. MSUB political science professor Dr. Jason Atkins expects the field to narrow even more after today.
Bloomberg and Warren are hovering around 15% or less. I don't see any way for them to stay in the race and be viable. I think there'll be immense pressure for them to withdraw and endorse Biden, as we saw Senator Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg do.
Well, this will be the first time that Bloomberg has been on the ballot, and he said today that he has no intention of dropping out. We'll be going to CBS coverage of Super Tuesday immediately following the Q2 News at 6 p.m. tonight, so that will affect your regular programming.
Well, should a terrorist or nuclear attack ever happen, the FBI trained federal, state, and local authorities in Helena today.
35 agencies, about 25 trainees took part, ranging from government officials, health experts, law enforcement, and volunteer firefighters. Transportation of radioactive material happens all across the country, and FBI Special Agent David Fitzgibbons says there's a potential for an incident almost anywhere.
He added it really does take tight collaboration and coordination to give an adequate response, and this training brings Montana agencies together.
All right.
In Montana, whether the crisis is at a local level or at a state level, trainings like this help us be able to have coordination and being able to help with getting out messaging and communicate to the public so that they stay informed as well too.
Well, Yellowstone National Park has begun bison management operations at the Stevens Creek area.
The 2020 Interagency Bison Management Plan calls for reducing the bison population between 600 and 900 animals. Now, bison that migrate out of the park are captured and processed through the Stevens Creek facility. Some are sent to various Native American tribes who will process the meat. Others will be held in quarantine for transfer to other areas if they are disease-free. Hunters will also harvest some of the bison. Yellowstone's bison population estimate is around 4,900 of the animals. And there's more news from across our state on the MTN 9 o'clock news. A self-taught artist turns exotic hardwoods from around the world into lifelike Montana outdoor scenes. We're going to show you. Join Jeanelle for that and more on the MTN statewide news. That's coming up at 9 on the CW. But first, on tonight's 5:30 news, the coronavirus wreaks havoc across the nation. We'll tell you how Montana is preparing if the virus hits close to home. And in sports, this ride may have cost Montana's Jess Lockwood a third world title. He's out for 6 months. Scott will tell us why.
You're watching MTN News with Janelle Slade and Russ Riesinger. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Green. This is the 5:30 news on Q2, Montana's news leader.